Welcome to R&R Living Life. Rick and I begin this episode exploring Darwin before making our way to Litchfield National Park, where we spent a couple of days. We spent time checking out the Esplanade, Bicentennial Park, Charles Darwin National Park, the magnetic termite mounds and stunning waterfalls, not to mention the remarkable geology of the region. The top end sure does pack a punch when it comes to incredible scenery. The city has changed a great deal since we were last here in 1997. Darwin is the smallest, wettest and most northerly of Australia's capital cities and serves as the top end's regional centre, built upon a low bluff overlooking Darwin Harbour and flanked by Francis Bay to the east and Cullen Bay to the west. After setting up Gidget, we had a quick look around Darwin before making our way to Charles Darwin National Park, about 4 kilometres from the city centre, along Tiger Brannan Drive. The park is a significant ecological and historical site, offering diverse habitats and insights into World War II history. The following day we dropped the boat in for a service and then made our way into the city centre. So much had changed since we were last here. Rick and I enjoyed strolling along the palm-lined walkways and lush green lawns of the Esplanade and Bicentennial Park, perched on the cliffs of the Darwin Harbour, where we caught the sea breeze and watched the swell. The Dutch visited Australia's northern coastline in the 1600s and landed on the Tiwi Islands, only to be attacked by the Tiwi peoples, but did create the first European maps of the area, accounting for the Dutch names of the area such as Arnhem Land and Groot Island. European settlement in Darwin began in 1869 when George Goyder, Surveyor-General of South Australia, established a settlement named Palmerston, marking the fifth attempt to settle Australia's north. Originally identified and named Port Darwin in 1839 by the HMS Beagle crew, the area grew rapidly after the 1871 Pine Creek gold discovery, acting as a crucial telegraph connection point to the world. Initially administered by South Australian Government until its transfer to the Commonwealth in 1911, the same year the city's official name changed from Palmerston to Darwin. During World War II, Darwin became the first mainland site in Australia to come under direct attack from the enemy, when it was the target of over 64 Japanese air raids, causing huge devastation and many civilian casualties. The top end played a key strategic role in the defence of northern Australia, with gun emplacements, oil storage tunnels, bunkers, military airstrips and lookout posts scattered in and around the city, with much of its unique military heritage well preserved. Around 10,000 Australian and other Allied troops arrived in Darwin at the onset of World War II to defend Australia's northern coast. On the 19th of February 1942 at 9:57 a.m, 188 Japanese warplanes attacked Darwin in 2 waves. It is said they were the same fleet that had bombed Pearl Harbor, though considerably more bombs were dropped on Darwin than on Pearl Harbor. Having rebuilt after the war, Darwin was again under threat with Cyclone Tracy coming ashore on Christmas Day in 1974, destroying over 70% of the city's buildings. Rick and I enjoyed our stay in Darwin, but it was time to move on. Just over 30 kilometres from Darwin, we again passed a number of airstrips. On the 2nd of April 1942, the then new Sattler RAAF airfield was bombed by the Japanese Imperial forces, but thankfully there was minimal damage as no Allied planes were on the strip at the time, as it was still under construction. Our next point of interest was the Noonamah Rodeo Arena, situated in a mostly rural area with much of the surrounding land used for agriculture. It sure brought back memories of yesteryear, as Rick and I had been to many rodeos over the years we lived out west. We then passed a number of trucking companies that have facilities in the area for loading and transporting livestock. Our camp for the next couple of nights was at Litchfield National Park. Just before Bachelor, we passed the Bachelor Solar Farm, twin renewable energy sites, delivering clean, reliable energy to the local grid. The solar farm is connected via underground cabling, designed to minimise land disturbance and visual impact while maintaining grid reliability. The area of Batchelor has an interesting history, then known by its broader locality Rum Jungle, and was administered by the South Australian Government until 1911. In the mid-1800s, the South Australian Government was surveying land called the Hundred of Goyder, with freehold land south of Darwin surveyed in 1869. Some was purchased by W. O. Clyde and likely used to grow tobacco, until it was selected by the government in 1911 as one of two demonstration farms to investigate the economic potential of the territory following the handover by the South Australian Government. The farm operated until 1919, experimenting with different crops and livestock with varied results. It wasn't until 1978 that the Northern Territory gained self-government. We were looking forward to exploring Litchfield National Park, an ancient landscape shaped by water. After a restful night, we went exploring. Our first stop of the morning was at the impressive magnetic termite mounds, standing up to 2 metres high on a wide floodplain. Some are up to 100 years old and are unique to the northern part of Australia. The thin edge of the mounds point north-south, with their broad backs facing east-west. Though termites are tiny individuals, together they form a massive army. They fulfill the role of harvesters in the tropical environment, with the massive impact they have on the environment apparent by the many mounds we saw across the floodplains. There are other species of termites that build within trees or underground. Cathedral termites, for example, build their nests on well-drained soils, unlike magnetic termites, who always build on seasonally flooded black soil plains. The termite mounds are aligned to use the sun to balance the internal temperature and ensure optimum conditions that require temperature and humidity to be consistent. On leaving the termite mounds, we made our way to the Lost City along a four-wheel drive access road off Litchfield Park Road. The 10-kilometre dirt track with varying conditions from very corrugated to a narrow, very windy road that proved to be very interesting in places, especially with oncoming vehicles. When we reached the Lost City, it proved to be a vast array of impressive sandstone towering rock formations that gives the impression of an ancient city in ruins. The intriguing formations of the Lost City were once part of a continuous sandstone layer that capped the present-day tabletop range. Over time, this cap has broken down or been weathered, and much of it has washed away. While most of this sandstone has ended up as sediment in the seas, the rock of the Lost City has proven more resilient to the forces of weathering and erosion. Natural weaknesses in sandstone tend to occur in planes at right angles to each other. Cracks form along lines of weaknesses, and moving water makes the cracks wider and deeper. Weathering of sandstone in this way results in areas of block-like shapes. Blocks of more resilient rocks have eventually become towers. There are 4 different types of sediment rocks in the area. Sandstone was the most prominent, made of sand-sized particles and having the texture of coarse sandpaper. Siltstone, made up of finer particles deposited in deeper water, has a smoother and silkier feel. Ripplestone, with its rippled surface, formed when sediments were laid down in shallow, turbulent water, with the sediments washed into a pattern that mirrors the waves on the water surface. And lastly, conglomerate. These rocks look like piles of stone that have been held together by sandy cement. Most of the stones are round and smooth, with sharp edges having been worn away as the stones are tumbled along in rivers before being deposited in calmer water. The tabletop range in Litchfield National Park has its origins in a shallow sea that once stretched across northern Australia. The landscape today is the result of cycles of land building and erosion alternating over millions of years, with the present age one of erosion, covered in savanna woodlands, forests, scenic pools, and rough, rocky landscapes. The range is gradually breaking down, and the sediments from which it was formed are slowly returning to the sea floor. Water seeps down through the porous sandstone until it reaches a more waterproof layer of rocks like quartzite. At this level, the water is channeled out from the cliff face. Sandstone erodes more slowly than quartzite and forms a capping on the plateau. Small running streams cut deep gorges into the erodible quartzite rocks, leaving deep gorges and rugged cliff tops. Creeks have been gouging out the softer soils of the plateau top since its formation. Where they encountered more resistant sandstone, unusual column-like structures were left. The lost city towers are remnants of the sandstone layers that originally capped the entire tabletop range. Some water manages to penetrate deep into the formation along ancient cracks, with ancient cracks or faults forming the sheer rock face of the range escarpment. The gorges are strewn with boulders eroded from above. The fallen rocks accumulate in piles at the base of the escarpment cliffs and form scree slopes. From the lost city we made our way back along the narrow road, weaving our way through sparse savanna woodlands and rocky sandstone heathlands, just as interesting as the lost city. The vegetation dominated by woolly butt and stringy bark, with an understory of spinifex and other hardy grasses, adapted to the tropical climate with intense growth during the wet season and significant drying during the dry season, making it prone to fire, hence the burnt sections along the road. The rich red growth of some of the new trees was amazing. The sandstone rock of the tabletop range has a great capacity to absorb and store water, like a huge sponge. So our next stop was at the tabletop swamp, formed in a depression that has filled with water every wet season. The forested, low-lying wetland, saturated by nutrient-rich soils and frequently standing water, provides a source of food, water and shelter for birds and other woodland creatures during the long, hot, dry seasons. Dominated by water-tolerant trees and shrubs, the swamp is a vital, highly diverse ecosystem, acting as a natural water filter, flood prevention buffer, and a habitat for frogs, fish, reptiles, crustaceans, insects, and a variety of birds. When the fringing paperbarks flower, nectar and pollen supplement the food source. Rick and I took time out to have morning tea while watching some of the bird life of the swamp and surrounding paperbark forest. It was so peaceful, only disturbed by bird calls. Good for the soul. Though the water usually recedes as the dry season approaches, there was still much to enjoy. For us, it was one of the highlights of the national park, without lots of tourists looking to swim under the waterfalls. From Tabletop Swamp we made our way a short distance along Litchfield Park Road to Tolma Falls car park. I was again intrigued by the bright yellow kapok flowers as we drove through rolling hills past rocky escarpments and grasslands. At Tolma Falls, located near the western boundary of the park, featuring the park's most spectacular high-volume waterfall as it cascades over two escarpments into a deep protected and inaccessible plunge pool. We first walked to the viewing deck before going to the lookout along a paved path through cycads and sandstone woodlands before arriving at the lookout with a spectacular view of the cliffs, falls and the extensive lowland country. The falls cascade from the tabletop range, eroding the landscape and creating a rich and vibrant sanctuary for wildlife in the gorge below. Rick and I stood and enjoyed the amazing scenery, not only the gorge itself, but the lowland country on the horizon. The rugged red cliffs were incredible, as was the protected monsoon forest pockets and dry woodlands, creating a picturesque setting. There were quite a few hikers doing the Tolma Falls and Creek Loop, a 1.6 kilometre return walk around the rim of the falls through typical top-end sandstone country and along Tolma Creek and back to the car park, but being the middle of the day, Rick and I gave this hike a miss. We were just happy to stand and watch as the water of the falls cascaded from an elevation of over 100 metres above sea level and plunged in two drops ranging in height between 32 and 43 metres to the pool below. The day was quite windy at the top of the lookout, but didn't seem to have a great effect on the waterfalls. I was fascinated by the regrowth of some of the plants clinging to rocks just below the walkway. It was interesting seeing some of the different ecosystems of the top end. The falls were named in 1865 by explorer Frederick Henry Litchfield after his late father's colleague in the South Australian Police, Alexander Tolmer. As the day was now past midday, we made our way to Wangi Falls, near the western boundary of the park, another impressive waterfall with two sets of waterfalls cascading down the cliff face into a wide pool surrounded by lots of greenery. The falls descends 52 metres via a series of segmented tiers that range in height between 40 to 50 metres. The falls are surrounded by monsoon forest and home to monsoon forest wildlife like goannas, bats, flying foxes and sometimes freshwater crocodiles. Rick and I followed a raised walkway across a bridge where the creek exits the plunge pool at the base of the falls, lined with palm-like pandanus plants, leading away from the falls and on through a diverse mix of lush monsoon rainforest, transitioning into dry open eucalypt woodlands and savanna as the trail ascends. The pandanus-lined streams were also a common feature along the path, while a large collection of flying foxes were roosting in the canopy above. On our return to the picnic area, Rick and I enjoyed a hamburger for lunch before making our way back to Florence Falls. At Florence Falls, we took a 1 kilometre monsoon walk along an uneven cobbled path with some steps that ends overlooking the falls. During the wet season, the sandstone plateau sheds large volumes of rainwater, while some is stored in underground cracks in the sandstone, which acts like a giant sponge. In the dry season, water slowly seeps out, feeding the creeks and waterfalls. The tabletop plateau has several spring-fed creeks, with Florence Creek starting just upstream of Burley Rockhole and flows off the plateau to join the Phineas River. Before calling it a day, we made a quick trip into Bachelor to check out Karlstein Castle. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Give us a thumbs up if you have. Join us next time as we leave Litchfield National Park and make our way to Alexander Forest Rest Area. Cheers for now. Live life to the full. Rick and Rosemary. R&R, Live and Life.